Peters, Homeless Services Coordinator with Washoe County Human Services Agency, and I'm going to share some information on the COC and coordinated entry, and then I'm going to hand it off to Echo Gill to talk about some work that they've done recently to get some feedback and some recommendations for further improvement. I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see my slides okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
All right. So first, I like to talk about what the COC is. And we frequently get this question, what is the COC? And it's a bit of a challenging question to answer because the COC is responsible for a couple core activities, and I'm going to walk us through those that are mandated by HUD. But I like to describe it as people working together to solve homelessness in their community. And we do that through policy, through shared data, and coming together and making decisions around priorities for resources. Like a lot of communities, we are under-resourced to fully meet the need, and so making some priorities helps make sure that we're most effective with the limited resources we have. Working together also helps us avoid silos and getting folks around a common table so that we can solve this incredibly challenging problem of homelessness in our community. HUD would define the COC as a program, and we've got the formal HUD definition here so folks can see that if you wanted to read those details. The National Alliance to End Homelessness also has some great information on their website about what the COC is, but I really like how they define it in this first bullet point. And they define a COC as a regional or local planning body that coordinates housing and services funding for homeless families and individuals. And I underlined and bolded the word coordinates because really at the end of the day, that's one of the most critical functions that we serve is getting everybody around that common table so that folks can collaborate and be working together as efficiently as possible. Per HUD requirements, the COC has 6 main activities that they're responsible for. The first is completing a consolidated application annually. That is a community-wide application for funding. There are a lot of steps in the process and a lot of coordination that is required. But as a COC, we're required to facilitate that process. We also are responsible for monitoring COC grantees. We do that monitoring annually, and the results of that monitoring has a potential impact on grantees' subsequent applications and how well they score. We also, and I'm going to talk about that in more detail, but it's a no wrong door approach that utilizes a standardized assessment across the community and results in a single prioritized list of people experiencing homelessness that housing referrals are made off of. So getting the community to agree on a standardized assessment, getting the community to agree on what the priorities are for those housing referrals, and maintaining that single list of people experiencing homelessness across the community. We also facilitate the annual point in time count. We do that once per year, the last 10 days in January. HUD just requires you to do a count every other year. Most communities that participate and do that do it every year because a count every 2 years is like, oof, that's a long time. We also maintain our homeless management information system. That's our community-wide database for people experiencing homelessness. BitFocus is our software vendor in that work, and they have really done an incredible job supporting us, and we are very appreciative of their efforts. We're also required to submit reports to HUD on community-wide aggregate numbers. There are some reports that are due quarterly and annually, but we're required to compile those numbers, most of which come out of our homeless management information system. To talk a little bit about that annual funding process, HUD refers to it as a consolidated application. As a community, we convene a committee who makes decisions on rating and ranking and funding priorities, sends that off to HUD, and that process and that kind of paperwork package is referred to as a consolidated application. So we've got a variety of agencies across the community completing applications for their individual programs. Some of those are permanent supportive housing programs, some are rapid rehousing, and then also we submit some supportive services applications that fund our homeless management information system and our coordinated entry work. We've also utilized that funding to support our lived experience advisory board, and Echo's going to talk in a little more detail on that. We convene a rating and ranking committee, and we utilize a facilitator for that work. The county is a grantee, so we've got a third party to do that facilitation just to make sure there's a good layer of separation there. That group rates each application and gives it an overall score. Then those applications are ranked in order of priority. So that committee makes decisions on what programs are most in need in the community, and that is compiled in a document where it's literally kind of application number one, application number two, order priority for the community that is then sent off to HUD to request that funding. And that has resulted last year in $3.1 million in funding. So I like to share that number just to really underscore how critical it is that we continue to maintain that funding and score well on that application. We're also evaluated as a community. We put together a really lengthy application on all the activities going on community-wide. That impacts scoring for the individual project application. As I mentioned, we're also required to monitor our grantees. HUD may also elect to monitor a program, but we're required at the local level to take a look and ensure everyone's in compliance annually. And those results also have an impact on subsequent applications. So we really want to encourage folks to score well on that monitoring to maintain that funding. Our point in time count, we're required by HUD to do that every 2 years. We do it annually in our community. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. If you're not on mute, if you could mute yourself, that'd be great. HUD requires that to be done the last 10 days in January across the country, unless a waiver is granted, which during COVID, there was some flexibility on that. We report those results locally and to HUD. Generally in our community, that does generate a lot of media coverage. In 2021, there was an observation-only count due to COVID-19 and really wanting to limit that contact. 2022 and 2023, we returned to the typical kind of HUD methodology for that count. Why do we do a PIT count? One, this allows us to measure and monitor trends and changes in homelessness on a local and national level. It allows us to compare ourselves to other communities who did a count with the same methodology. It also helps understand what resources we need so we can strategize the best way to use them, and it is a federal requirement. There are really two main components of the point in time count. The first is a sheltered point in time count. So those are folks that are staying in an emergency shelter. That includes those using hotel and motel vouchers. In many communities, vouchers are used to pay for a hotel in lieu of emergency shelter. That's rather limited in our community, but we do include those in that sheltered count. If people are paying for a motel on their own, we count that in a different way through our motel count numbers. So for the emergency shelter part, that's emergency shelters as you would kind of commonly think of them. And then if somebody is staying in a motel through payment by another agency, like a nonprofit, we include transitional housing. Safe haven is included. We currently don't have any safe haven programs in our community. And all this work is per kind of HUD methodology. We also do an unsheltered count. That's an in-person count of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So people staying in a place not meant for human habitation, in a car, in a park, in an abandoned building, in a campground or parking lot, folks who are in that unsheltered environment. We see a lot of value in the PIT because it is our once per year opportunity to do an in-person count of people who are unsheltered. We don't have the resources to do that in-person unsheltered count on a regular basis. So doing that once per year is, we see a benefit. You can see that we also share these results annually and do kind of a year-over-year comparison. So we release this chart every year. We released our 2024 data a couple of months ago, and we saw, frankly, some really similar prior year. We also this year included utilization.
Looks like we got a delay in Katrina. Trina, are you still there? Oh, looks like we lost her. Can everybody else still hear me? Is it me? Okay.
Am I back?
Oh, you're back. Okay, welcome
Great.
back.
Um, this year we had a really low response rate on the motel count. We
Katrina,
only had about.
your screen stopped sharing.
Oh, okay. Well, hang on a sec here. How's that?
Okay.
Great. This year we had a really low response rate on our motel count. So these are people staying in a hotel or motel, paid for with their own funds. We had only had about half of the weekly motels respond. So we want to make sure and appropriately categorize that portion of our point in time count. We're also responsible for the homeless management system, as I mentioned. BitFocus is our statewide vendor. They're also our HMIS administrator. They play a key role in pulling data out of that system and submitting those reports to HUD. We have had a big community-wide goal of increasing the number of agencies using HMIS. Getting agencies across the community entering data into the same database allows us to better analyze those community-wide trends, look at things like inflow and outflow, and have an accurate count of people experiencing homelessness across the community. In pursuit of that goal, in January of 2021, we called every agency across the community and asked them if they were putting data into HMIS. At that time, only around 40% of programs serving people experiencing homelessness were putting data into HMIS. And over 2.5 years, we were able to get that number up to be over 90% in August of 2023. So we are thrilled to have made that progress, and we just really appreciate all of our agencies across the community coming on board so that, again, we can analyze those community-wide trends. We also, in addition to the PIT, published monthly numbers using the Built for Zero methodology, and that allows us to dig a little deeper, but only possible through everybody putting that data into that same database. In terms of our local structure, we have two main groups. The first is our Northern Nevada Continuum of Care Leadership Council. Per the HUD regs, we are required to have a formal governing body. That group operates per. We have a formal governance structure. We have a formal membership roster. So we're kind of Robert's Rules of Order style on that meeting, passing policy, and coming to group decisions, consensus-based on things like community-wide priorities. Our second group is our Regional Alliance to End Homelessness. This is our stakeholder group. Anyone is welcome. This is our Real Come One Come All group. We meet every month, second Thursday of the month at 8 a.m. This group has met for about 20 years. Participation, I would say, dipped down a little bit during COVID, but we're getting back up to full capacity. And if anybody on this call is not on that email listserv and getting those notifications on those meetings, please email me directly. We would be happy to add you. It's also an opportunity for anybody attending the meeting to share information on new policies, programs, general updates, really just an opportunity for anybody in the community to share any information. All right, digging a little into coordinated entry. So here in Washoe County, we are utilizing coordinated entry, and per the HUD requirements, we're utilizing a standard assessment, and we're making referrals into available program openings based on acuity. We are utilizing the chat or the community housing assessment tool, and I'll talk in a little more detail on that. But these are per HUD requirements. We really see a lot of benefit in utilizing the coordinated entry system because without it, each client would have to go to a program to apply to try to access those resources, which you can see how duplicative and how time intensive that would be for clients. It would also mean that each program had their own wait list, which would be challenging for agencies to implement. Having multiple wait lists with hundreds of people on them would be very logistically challenging. And also, this allows us to make sure that agencies aren't cherry picking clients. We make decisions on priorities as a community. There's that standardized assessment that's completed, and then clients go on that list in that order of priority. So looking at this visual here, if we kind of start at the bottom, we've got community agencies, including the CARES campus, that have access to this assessment and to make referrals to the coordinated entry system. So we're utilizing that no wrong door approach. We've got a wide variety of agencies that will do an in-person assessment and referral if appropriate to coordinated entry. Um, we've got that standardized assessment, so everybody's having the same criteria applied. And then we're making referrals to people when that housing program opens according to acuity and to that program's eligibility criteria. If you're a HUD-funded COC program, you're required to accept referrals off of the coordinated entry system. Here in Washoe County, we just have one central matchmaker. That's a Washoe County staff member who doesn't carry a caseload or work directly with clients, so we've got a layer of separation on that. And there are two main types of programs that we're making referrals into off the queue. The first is permanent supportive housing. For a client to be eligible for permanent supportive housing, they have to have a disability and also meet length of time for homelessness. So they have to have been experiencing homelessness for at least a year or 4 episodes over the last 3 years, adding up to a year. The rapid rehousing program, folks must be literally eligible or meet HUD Category 4, which is the actively or attempting to flee domestic violence. We were also making emergency housing referrals off the queue per those HUD requirements for that voucher type. Our emergency housing vouchers are pretty well used up at that point. So we're no longer able to make referrals into that program, but wanted to be sure and include them on the list because you'll see the number of folks we've moved into an emergency housing voucher on some of our data slides here in a little bit. As I mentioned, we utilize our community housing assessment tool. That's our coordinated entry assessment. An assessment must be conducted
There again.
procedures. If folks
Oh,
wanted to dig into those details.
Katrina, I don't know if you can hear me, but we're losing you again. Do you want to try maybe turning your video off and seeing if that gives you more bandwidth?
How's that?
Yeah, keep talking.
All right, great.
Okay, that seems to be working.
Awesome. We get a lot of questions on kind of the scoring range, and so I wanted to just briefly touch on our scoring range, which is that you have to score at least a 15 to be referred to the community queue. And then 25 and above is the scoring range for permanent supportive housing. So permanent supportive housing is kind of this dark pink largest portion. The rapid rehousing and EHV is this purple bar, and blue are scoring ranges that would not meet thresholds. In order to be referred to the queue, you do have to be literally homeless. So that's category 1 or 2 per the HUD definition, or category 4, which is fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. And HUD does task communities with deciding how to prioritize their list of people seeking housing. Through our leadership council, that group came to consensus on prioritizing people who are chronically homeless and people who are in that transition age youth, that 18 to 24 age range. I like to just touch briefly on number of people on the queue so people have a feel for kind of the volume and the trends of that volume. We typically have around 110 to 140 people in the permanent supportive housing scoring range, and we typically have at least 200 in the rapid rehousing scoring range. So quite a significant number of people seeking that resource, meeting that actively homeless criteria. The next slide, and there's a lot of information here, is the number of referrals comparing and contrasting the number of move-ins. So you see kind of a summary total here at the top. The gray are permanent supportive housing. That light blue is emergency housing vouchers. You can see we didn't have those in 2021, but we did in 2022 and 2023. And then this dark blue is the rapid rehousing. So you can see number of referrals is pretty significant. But the number of people we were able to actually move into a unit is quite a bit lower. There's a couple factors here. Capacity of programs changes over time and number of units available. For permanent supportive housing, folks can stay in that program for as long as they need it. So that's going to reduce the turnover and the number of units available per year when funding stays level. And also, once folks are referred to the queue, we frequently have challenges locating that person. And we've applied a number of strategies to try to increase the success rate of getting somebody moved into a unit once they have that referral, but want to just be really transparent on the data so folks have a feel of how many referrals we make and how many active move-ins that results in. I like to share these statistics because they tend to stick in folks' mind, but we average around 30-ish people we're able to move into a rapid rehousing unit per year. That means we currently have about 10 years worth of folks on the queue needing that resource. For permanent supportive housing, we move about 10 people in a year. That means we have about 15 years worth of people needing that resource. And I like to share these resources to continue to build urgency on the need for number of units in these supportive housing type programs. And this is also if not one more person is added to the queue ever. So really just underscoring the critical need for us to increase that funding and increase the number of units available. My next slide is these are the programs in our community for 2020, 21, and 2022. The red bar is separating programs on the left are all permanent supportive housing programs. Programs on the right are in the rapid rehousing range. So the majority of our funding is permanent supportive housing, but again, a limited number of units due to length of time folks tend to stay in those units, and rapid rehousing being that shorter term intended to be that shorter term intervention. So that was a lot of information to digest, but hopefully that was helpful in giving an overview of our COC and current coordinated entry system. Looking to the future, we are working to align eligibility criteria for programs receiving referrals with the demographics of the queue. So we've done quite a bit of data analysis trying to get to that kind of ideal world where we've got resources that match the need of folks trying to access housing. We want to ensure full utilization of COC funding. So we've looked at some opportunities to reallocate some funds if folks aren't using those. We also want to increase funding of our COC programs. We need more openings to be able to make more referrals in, and there's policy and data work we can do here locally to continue to support that funding coming into the community. And then our last item of future work is implementing feedback from our Lived Experience Advisory Board. And that is a perfect segue for me to hand it off to Echo to talk in a little more detail on their work.
Hi, everybody. I'm Echo Gill. I'm Lived Experience Advisory Board member here for Northern Nevada. So our board was created in July of 2023 when the Nevada Homeless Alliance got a grant from HUD to begin the board. We have participated so far. We did rating and ranking. We did panels where we interviewed people applying for funding and then ranked their answers to give to the committee to help them base their decisions off of. We participated in pit count so far. We did the meetings leading up to and we involved in the actual pit count. We've reviewed the policies and procedures, especially the ones related to coordinated entry. So we spent a good amount of time reviewing all of those and providing some recommendations on those. And then we did our big project was our coordinated entry focus group project. We held focus groups with homeless services agencies in Washoe County, specifically ones that are HUD funded, like Our Place, CARES, Village on Sage, places like that. We did focus groups with leadership, frontline staff, and with clients at all of those places. And then we also interviewed people on the streets, people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. We took all of that data, we put it all together, and we came up with recommendations, just separate ones for individual agencies, which they're the only ones that received those recommendations. We didn't share the individual ones with anyone else. And then we came up with recommendations for the county as a whole. And we've been presenting that one for about the last month or so, trying to share that information with as many people as we can. It was really, really informative. We learned a lot. We had initially began as a secret shopper experience, but really quickly we learned that it wasn't necessary. clients and stuff were very forthcoming and really honest and open with us. So we were able to end up just kind of scrapping the secret shopper and just sticking with the focus groups. I think that's all I really have. If anybody has any questions about all of that, I just dumped on you.
That's
Thank
awesome.
you so much. Oh, go ahead, Katrina.
Sorry, one thing I forgot to mention is we are convening a committee to work on implementing the Lived Experience Advisory Board recommendations for coordinated entry. We also do an annual assessment of our coordinated entry system, so we got some feedback from that. And we want to also
We lost you again.
We lost you.
that are needed. So if anybody's interested in joining,
Katrina, you cut out. Do you want to put the ask in the chat for how to join if anyone's interested in joining? You cut out a bit.
well, shoot.
I see that Bill put some questions in the chat too. If you want to, maybe Katrina and Echo briefly answer those questions, and then Brenda can get ready to launch her presentation.
Totally. Let me pop this chat open. Okay, we've got how much does the demolition of motels in Reno impact motel counts? Really challenging to say this year. Participation of the motel count is completely voluntary, and we only had about half of them opt to participate this year. Yes, we'll add you to the raw email list. Why do we want a degree of separation between the matchmaker and others in the work? Just curious. Great question. In some communities, an agency that receives COC funding is also the matchmaker. And so
Get cut now.
When it's that neutral third party, that's a layer of separation. Well, where is our permanent supportive housing in Washoe County? I think, Joanna, are you able to share the slides and you'll kind of see the list then of who's funded? Each year we also release who was renewed. And then are PSH stay lengths determined by use of services? They are not. It is a HUD requirement that those services are optional, that we're offering those in an active and robust way, but clients are not required to participate in those services, which aligns with that kind of gold standard of permanent supportive housing and that programming model. Great job, Echo. Super agreed. And yeah, just really appreciate the Lived Experience Advisory Board work. Washoe County was able to utilize that HUD funding to contract for them to be able to do this kind of deep dive on our coordinated entry system. They did a phenomenal job. And yeah, we're just excited to keep working with them so we can get those recommendations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Echo and Katrina. That was really perfect. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Brenda if you're ready.
I'm ready. I do not have a fancy presentation, so everyone gets to just look at me and hear my annoying voice for a few minutes, but thank you for inviting me. I'm loving just being able to kind of join Katrina as, you know, kind of partner COCs and just share out. And so I'll skip over all the COC stuff because I didn't plan on talking about it because Katrina did an amazing job. And I just primarily wanted to focus about permanent supportive housing that we have in Southern Nevada, so all of Clark County, because I believe the majority of everyone on the call is from our northern counterparts. And so Clark County, we have 11 different permanent supportive housing programs in our community. I don't think it's enough. I think everyone could agree locally that it's not enough. And we're really recognizing that even within some of our rapid rehousing programs, that is the place for us to find out people that truly need permanent supportive housing, but may not have been captured on the front end. And so with those 11 programs, we have a capacity of a little bit over 2,000. We have 2,134 beds serving individuals in permanent supportive housing here in Southern Nevada. We are usually about an average of a 75.86% utilization rate though. So even though we have a lot of beds, we're still not at capacity. So I think that just speaks to being very transparent, and we could do better, right? We should be at a much higher capacity rate in programs such as permanent supportive housing, because it's such a unique and sensitive need, serving our most vulnerable that are experiencing homelessness. I will say that our biggest player in the permanent supportive housing world or market is our VASH Housing Choice Vouchers program. It's amazing. There are a little over 1,500 of those beds that I mentioned. So over half of our permanent supportive housing is all for veteran vouchers. Hence why we need to do more for the rest of our population. I kind of also want to mention or hit that we are really looking at some of those needs and how it's kind of manifesting in our community, and how we can maybe make some program adjustments and modifications without losing capacity. And so one of those things is we have a really large rapid rehousing program. It serves about 500 households. So we will be very, very soon, hopefully within the next week soon, connecting with those providers within that program to see if any of them can modify their program or have the bandwidth to kind of convert to PSH. So we'll end up splitting that program to be a rapid rehousing and a permanent supportive housing program, to where individuals identified that need PSH in rapid rehousing can just transfer to that other PSH side of the house. One of the biggest probably highlights for that program is it's not HUD funded, it's not COC funded. Rapid rehousing has the ability to be very, very flexible, even within HUD's guidelines and things of that nature. But because we're county funding it, we'll kind of be able to extend or modify what that looks like and have people be able to transition from one side of the house to the other, right into a PSH bed. And some of those conversations, I think, those providers on the call that probably offer rapid rehousing services already, you guys know within the first 6 months of serving a client that client's not going to be a rapid rehousing person, right? Like they're going to need X, Y, and Z to move on, or to get to the point where they can access that VASH voucher or that other voucher that's just 2 years out. So this is really going to offer an opportunity for us to not kick people out of rapid rehousing back into homelessness. They're not going to lose chronicity, because if they were chronically homeless upon entry into rapid rehousing and they never exited rapid rehousing but transitioned to a PSH program, we're golden, right? And I say that because I've heard it come up so many times in the last 12 days. Like, so many people are concerned about losing chronicity and making sure clients are eligible, but we still want to get them off the street and we still want to get them into a program. And so that is your safety net. Enroll them in PSH while they're enrolled in an emergency shelter. Or if they have to leave and go into a substance abuse counseling program, make sure you enroll them in PSH upon entry to that detox. So if they're detox for 92 days, they're good and they can kind of transition. So just a little plug that if something that we've recognized come up in our community, I don't know if it's the same for you, but we're really, really excited about, again, a 500 household program, splitting that up to having both maybe 250, it's not going to be perfect, right? 250 that maintain rapid rehousing, and then the other 250 for permanent supportive housing until someone can move on into their own stability and kind of be able to exit successfully long term. And another option to vouchers would be subsidized housing, such as the low income options coming on board in 2025 from our Clark County Welcome Home and our Southern Nevada Regional Housing Authority's project-based projects. And also want to put in a little bit of a plug to NHC. I think they helped fund these longer term PSH options that we're having come on board. And it's really amazing that we're able to kind of bring in multiple partners and collaborate and really have an outcome that our community's been dying for. Not enough. We all know we need more affordable housing, so I'm never going to stop saying that, right? But I know that Katrina spent a really awesome highlight around coordinated entry and how its purpose is to prioritize our most vulnerable in our community. But I kind of want to take a little bit of a stem off to that. And Clark County is revamping our coordinated entry process and really looking into the needs of our community that are unique to anywhere else in Nevada or any other state, even though we do find similarities at times, and we do serve some of the same clients And one of the first things that we focused on was, what are the barriers, excuse me, what are the barriers that someone may be experiencing that's going to prevent them from exiting homelessness on their own? And the more barriers that they actually need support to overcome, that's how we're defining the most vulnerable. And I saw Martin on the call, and he's probably going like, that's not the language, Brenda. He could absolutely give you the better definition of vulnerable to our community in Southern Nevada. But with that, there's something to be said that we can use coordinated entry and meet HUD's requirements, but not necessarily use a score to determine that all the time. And there's probably some cringing going on. But my point to drive home is that there's a lot of eligibility criteria for various programs. And so with some of these, like with this PSH like adjustment that we're looking at one of our programs, they're going to go through coordinated entry. They're going to have a score, but there's going to be other eligibility criteria so that we can make sure that we're capturing those that normally wouldn't be captured. So if someone has an assessment score, but they're identified in another program, we're gonna move those over. We're not gonna wait till we hit their assessment score for them to access a PSH bed, if that makes sense. And so just trying to be a little bit creative and innovative on how we use coordinated entry, how we use program eligibility to drive getting people into services as quickly as possible, while simultaneously using case conferencing in our top 20 and coordinated entry to prioritize our most vulnerable so that they're getting access and they're getting people who are focused on them directly and engaging them as quickly as possible to get them into the services they need and into programs. And so it's really exciting what we're doing with coordinated entry. It's really exciting having an outside consultant come in and provide like feedback and guidance and really focus on what our community is voicing and saying that like, this is what we recognize is what we need. But kind of connecting it with PSH in a way that not only are we pulling from the most vulnerable in the top 20 in our queue, but we're also able to kind of navigate some of that transition. Rapid rehousing programs, again, identifying those who needed the service and moving them into the appropriate program so that we can continue to kind of get people rapidly exited as well and avoid chronicity. So anyway, we can kind of hit those plugs. So I know I spoke very, very quickly. I hope something sunk in for someone, but if you do have questions, I'm available. And if there was anything I didn't hit that you wanted me to, Joanna, let me know.
No, I think that that's great. And if Martin or Katrina, Dr. Katrina, you want to talk about the process of the change or anything that you think might be pertinent to this group or might be interesting to Washoe County, feel free to chime in. This is a really informal group. So we sometimes don't even have any presentations and we just talk the whole time together. So
okay, so
while everybody's thinking of questions, sorry, go ahead.
I'll start, and then Martin, one of our Southern Nevada Live Desk consultants, who's also a board member, he is a little smarter than me. So we did have a short-term group of individuals who went in to revamp coordinated entry because we strongly felt that people, their vulnerability should not be determined by a score. Our Live Desk consultants did a secret shopper project and made many recommendations, and our community has pretty much adopted 100% of them. So this whole revamp of the coordinated entry and not using a score because people are like, oh, you got a 23, you need a 24, right? That score should really determine if the person is vulnerable, at that vulnerability. So our definition of vulnerability is Martin, what's our definition of vulnerability? Martin, do you know that definition? Okay, it's something about people who cannot exit homelessness on their own, right?
Yeah.
And then we have vulnerability factors and all that good stuff. So I'm just gonna, and then after the short term, we created a interim prioritization policy, which we're implementing in our community. I've given our HUD technical assistants 3 of my staff members to dedicate 15 hours per week of their time to get through this list of thousands of people to try to redo the new assessment. We've grown into a long-term project will be working on the long-term change of coordinated entry process, which Martin can talk more about as a board member and give us the correct definition. So those are the things that we're so excited about, is that we're not looking you know, if the person, like, we have some prioritizations, if the person has kids, if they have a criminal history, we're looking at trimorbidity, so that would be health, substance abuse, mental health. And there's like two more that I can't think of right now, but Martin can fill in for me.
Hi everyone, Martin Castro, LiveDex consultant. So yeah, we went ahead and in the short-term planning group, we went ahead and tried to go ahead and just start with defining what vulnerability means, because we understand that there's not enough housing for everyone to just go ahead and get placement. So we defined our most vulnerable as those less likely to exit homelessness on their own. And so we have the main priorities, which would be like parenting, the vulnerability factors, excuse me, parenting, age, trimorbidity. They can score a point for each individual, you know, mental health, substance use, or chronic health. And then we have, so in total we have around like 7 points. Age, I don't know if I mentioned that, age is one of them. And then so again, this new system is to go ahead and move away from the scores and like, you know, like, oh, this program only accepts 18 to 25, or, you know, just stop, like, give people more of a story rather than just a score, you know? And so with that being said, the new housing assessment process is really based around housing problem solving conversations, which what that means is that, like, as an assessor, before placing them into a queue with it's like not moving and it's really designed to only identify the most vulnerable, it's not supposed to be like a waiting list for housing. With the HPS conversations, we go ahead and try to use different techniques such as motivational interviewing, active listening, just all these like high concept, like person-centered approach, like all these concepts to go ahead and have the client potentially identify their exit plan. And if that doesn't work, like if there's no options available or everything's been exhausted, and there's no way to divert them to a program in the community that already exists, for example, like Ticket to Home, or using flex funds upcoming, or like, let's say even like eviction prevention, whatever it looks like. If there's no I'll rephrase on that. So with not eviction prevention, because so the people that are being placed on the housing assessment are only category 1 and 4, so literal homeless and domestic violence. I only say eviction prevention because it's like there's programs out there, you know, programs exist. And so like if we can use one of these programs in the community to go ahead and resolve the homelessness, we will go ahead and that will be our first starting point to go ahead and help this individual into their next housing opportunity or position or place. And so I'll give you guys some real life examples. So yesterday I went ahead and we partnered with an agency that we go ahead and we're trying to reassess everyone in the community. And by having these housing problem solving conversations, I did, out of 3 assessments I did, 2 of the individuals had some sort of plan already in place. They just required like more like follow through with a case manager. They required just like kind of like one of them, like for example, had like this concept of like they're gonna move in with a friend of a friend. I was like, hey, you know, like that, you don't know that individual, so how about we try shared housing where you pick, it's your choice who you want to move in with. And then the person was a little like, you know, the person understood that like their income was not enough, so they were open to the idea. And then we did the actual application, we walked them through it, because again, we're trying to do these successful transfers or warm handoffs or whatever, you know, successful handoffs, like to make sure the client succeeds. And we're all using HMIS, so all our progress can be documented, or housing problem conversation can be documented, and everyone can pick up where we left off. So after doing the shared housing application, they felt excited. They were like, hey, that was actually really fun. You know, they got to pick what kind of roommate they wanted, or excuse me, they got to kind of pick what roommate they were looking for, what they were open to, what were absolute like no's that they would not tolerate and stuff like that. So many individuals have some sort of idea of what their exit could look like. And then with this new assessment process, we're trying to go ahead and identify the most vulnerable that can't exit on their own. But again, this is only so this is right now an interim process. So what that means is that this is not the final complete version. This is I don't want to say that it's like an experiment. This is more like, no, this is like progressive forward thinking, that this is only the beginning. Like this is the baseline of where we're going to start with our community. Our community wants to move in this direction of like trying to go ahead and find the most vulnerable. But then these factors might not be everything. So that's what the long-term planning committee is looking into. It's like, how can we evolve this coordinated entry? Like the times of COVID are gone. The whole need to go ahead and, identify COPD and like all these different factors that could make someone more vulnerable for COVID. While COVID does still exist, like, that's not what the community is currently like, let's say, tackling, per se. So with this new long-term committee, we're going to look at data. We're going to see, are we missing people? We're going to see, we even have questions about like, hey, have you been treated on, do you feel like you have been treated unjustly for either your race, your ethnicity, your race, your religion, like all these things. We're trying to go ahead and we're going to have the system be continuously updated. It's going to be kind of like a breeding coordinated entry. Let's say, God forbid, tomorrow, like the problem everyone in Southern Nevada recognizes is seniors. Like let's say everyone's aging faster, whatever, and then we can tailor it to seniors. So that's the great flexibility about not relying on the score anymore. And I will admit that this is all brand new, progressive. It's just that like like anything, like we're working out little kinks and stuff, but I'm just so happy to be a part of this transitional phase where we can hopefully assist the most vulnerable in our community.
You so much, both all of you. That is really exciting, and I really love that kind of person-centered approach where you're really taking a collaborative approach with the people you're trying to serve, and you're really trying to draw out the unique vulnerabilities of each person instead of kind of scoring people as if all vulnerabilities affect us all in the same way. So that is really, really innovative. It looks like Katrina has a question also. Did you have your hand up for a question?
No, not a question. I just wanted to really acknowledge Clark County's work to kind of rethink coordinated entry. It's a incredibly challenging system to run, and making decisions on priorities are really tough conversations. So just really wanted to acknowledge the work that they've done to do an overhaul. And I think Martin mentioned they're kind of in pilot and new launch phase. So just really looking forward to seeing the learning lessons and how it all shakes out.
Yeah, me too. That's awesome. Looks like there's some questions in the chat too. And thank you. I see that Dr. Katrina was answering some of them in the chat as well.
I can answer the one from Eileen. What is the current eligibility criteria for rapid housing, and does the program still assist with rent for 1 year? And I think she's referring to the ones that I was talking about splitting. And so the criteria for rapid rehousing, we actually do pull from a chat, an assessment score. We don't use the word chat anymore in the Southern Nevada. So we do pull from an assessment score. So the majority of our rapid rehousing programs, as well as permanent supportive, are pulling from the top of the queue, or the top score, right? The most vulnerable. We do have some programs, however, that we've opted to try to make sure that we're also tackling upstream, right? Preventing chronicity. And so some pull from the very bottom, a 0, or a 1. And some, right now we have one, this one that we're looking at kind of splitting as well, pulling from the middle. So it's going to pull from like the 2 to 5. And so, you have that flexibility, like, to be creative and really kind of identify all those people that are experiencing homelessness that need services, and how can we get them the appropriate ones as quickly as possible. And so some of the barriers that rapid rehousing participants face in finding permanent housing is finding affordable housing. And I think that speaks for everyone. all across America right now that there's just not enough affordable housing. There's not enough renters willing to come down a little bit. I think there's a lot of greed going on. I'm just going to be honest. And I think that's just something that when people say like it's a community problem, that's how the community can fight for it. If you see something popping up in your backyard, and you're like, oh no, I don't want affordable housing behind me. Someone said at the conference, and I know Martin and Katrina may have heard the same thing, is, well, if it's not going to be in your backyard in affordable housing, you'll see them in your front yard. So, you know, it's kind of our, like, be a voice that, yes, I'm okay with this popping up over here on the corner. And yes, I'm on board. We need more of it, because you can either look at an apartment complex or you can look at homeless on your sidewalk that you could have helped had you not complained about affordable housing going up in your area. So again, it sounds like a simple common answer, but it's a common answer. We just can't find landlords that are within an affordable renting price, right, for those experiencing homelessness.
Definitely. What I like about these presentations as well is just kind of that it really also illustrates the need for this community coordination, so that you know all the resources that are available and you know exactly who those resources are most ideal for. So when you're meeting with clients, you have built these relationships with these other service providers and other organizations. And that's why I really believe in the COC and coordinated continuum of care, and like really that regional coordination, because you have to bring folks together so that there's a shared understanding of everything that's available, and we can really be efficient and relational and collaborative to get folks into the places where they're going to be most likely to be successful long term, right? So if you put the wrong person in the wrong program, they're unlikely to be successful, and that can really affect our award monies and our funding and our, and ultimately affect the people, right? So we're not really resolving homelessness in a long-term way, which is the most important thing. So the community coordination and the COC and the coordinated entry, I really believe in, even though sometimes they're imperfect and we're working towards making them better, but what they really do is ultimately serve our community in the best possible way. So thank you so much for all of you that shared today. I really, really appreciate this group so much. And I love that we're able to ask questions. Feel free to continue to ask questions. I'm just like talking because I'm nervous. So when it's quiet, I just keep talking. But yeah, I really appreciate this group, and I'm so grateful for everybody that showed up today. I just wanted to give one announcement actually before I forget, is that right after this meeting from 1 to 2, the Interagency Council on Homelessness is meeting, and they're going to be giving an AB 310 update if they get quorum and continue the meeting. So if anybody, I'll put the link in the chat. That's a public meeting and anybody's welcome to attend. I think Dr. Katrina, you're on the board, right?
I'm on the board, and I want to announce that LEAB and LiveX, Southern Nevada LiveX, will be presenting at the next meeting in 4 minutes.
Oh my gosh, in 4 minutes. So if any of you have open time, I'm planning on listening in for sure.
So William's question, was that to Northern and Southern Nevada? About the top?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, I'm interested in the answer to, for either group or both.
So in Southern Nevada, as we're having this interim prioritization policy, the score doesn't dictate their vulnerability, right? So the programs who have open beds, we're going to be looking at eligibility for those programs for those most vulnerable. And so we're not starting from the top to bottom. We're not saying 30, 27, 26. We're not doing it like that. The matchers are matching them to the program according to the eligibility for the program. And the programs are not going to have an eligibility of you must have 24 and up, right? It's going to be this, that, and other, right? And so that's how people will be matched. And so we have our top 20 list, and, we have teams to go out and try to find those individuals, get them matched up and things like that. So
So it's working from the programs to the people rather than working from the people to the programs.
Yes. They're working together and just kind of taking out that number thing, which
Okay,
makes
thank you.
a list of over 3,000 people.
From a Northern Nevada perspective, I think your comment is well placed, right? If our assessment tool is assessing for acuity and people with the highest level of need, and we're using a validated and reliable assessment tool, then that would kind of outline a process where we're taking folks who have that highest level of acuity and trying to place those first. No coordinated entry system is perfect, so I want to really lead with that. But I think that really is the challenge of we want to make sure folks who are higher acuity, and we really are looking at it from an acuity. I think vulnerability, giant word, can be defined in a lot of different ways. So really looking at folks who are most acute in Northern Nevada, ensuring that our limited resources are used to place those folks first. HUD does put certain requirements in place to try to adhere to that low barrier model. So really, when we're thinking about permanent supportive housing, and I see Juliana's on here, she has been managing a permanent supportive housing program in our community for a very long time and is very much an expert on the topic. So I would happily have her weigh in if she's still on and able, but making sure that case management is optional and that we're working with folks in the most proactive way, but that we're not making it mandatory, that we are taking that low barrier approach, that we're not putting any conditions on program requirements. Those are all HUD requirements of permanent supportive housing programs. So we really work with our programs to make sure that everybody is being low barrier, is being housing first, and that we're taking those folks who do have that highest level of acuity and place those into programs first. But again, coordinated entry, wildly challenging, right? I can give you this nice logical, this sounds like a great perfect system. The reality of getting folks into programs can be incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
True. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, Katrina, Dr. Katrina, Martin, and Brenda for sharing so much with us today. I really, really appreciate that. Katrina, if you could send me the slides, I'll go ahead and send those out, and I'll remind everybody about the upcoming exciting event. And if you're going to be tuning into the ICH meeting, I will see you there.